There is a quiet, alluring promise built into a lot of modern healing language, and it goes something like this. If you approach yourself gently enough, carefully enough, compassionately enough, the hard things will eventually start being hard and they won't hurt you like they used to. And I understand why that promise is so appealing. For people who've lived under too much pressure for too long, gentleness feels like oxygen. It feels like a corrective, necessary measure. It feels like sanity. But here's the biological reality that almost never gets said plainly. If your nervous system does not become more resilient in a measurable way, the same stressors will continue to have the same impact. Time alone doesn't change that. Insight alone doesn't change that. Even relief doesn't change that. Before we go further, this is another conversation where your orientation matters because different nervous systems hear stress and training very differently. So if you haven't taken our Somatic Skins Quiz yet, it's really useful here. Pause the video, go down. It just takes a few moments, and it'll show you how your system instinctively responds to pressure. Without that clarity, people will often try to heal the wrong thing, or they'll be really protective around the wrong pattern. So here's the core idea. Healing that reduces exposure can be necessary, especially acutely at certain stages, but healing that never increases capacity eventually plateaus. When that happens, the world doesn't get safer, it just gets smaller. Resilience is not a belief. It's a biological property. It's the system's demonstrated ability to remain organized under load. And the only way that that property changes is through controlled exposure to stress that the system survives, integrates, and then recovers from. So if stress is always avoided, outsourced, or softened in some way, like stress is a sign that you shouldn't do that thing, then your nervous system will never update its threat map. The same stimulus will continue to register as dangerous or bad because nothing has shown the system otherwise. And this is where attachment and bias come in, because if you're bonded to a particular fear, whether it's conflict, intensity, responsibility, intimacy, or failure, and you never train your system to meet that thing differently, no amount of reframing it will change its impact on you. The fear will retain its authority because it has never been disconfirmed somatically. Let's make this concrete. Take the warrior. For many warriors, stress is familiar. Pressure feels normal. What isn't always trained is systemic resilience. They can push, they can endure, they can override, but the system often has paid for it later through rigidity, chronic tension, or delayed collapse. Controlled systemic stress for the warrior looks like practices that demand full organization under load, followed by clean recovery. The deadlift is a classic example, not because it's heavy work, but because it's honest work. You cannot negotiate with the weight. You cannot talk yourself through it. Your structure either organizes or it doesn't. Attention either consolidates or it fragments. Breath will either support your system or it becomes noise. What changes resilience here isn't the lift itself. It is the repeated experience of acute stress that is entered deliberately, met cleanly, and then exited fully. So stress hormones will rise, the task completes, and then the system learns that pressure can be metabolized instead of carried. I love the deadlift. Over time, then, the same external stressors outside of the lift itself, deadlines, confrontations, responsibility, they'll stop triggering the same internal cascade. And this isn't because the warrior has reframed them. It's because the system has learned biologically that it can meet force without injury. Now let's look at the asset, often called the empath. For this skin, stress often comes through relational or sensory overload, like too much input, too much emotion, too much responsibility for others' states. So gentle healing will often focus on rest, boundaries, and reduction, which can be essential early on, but that's where it stops. The same environments will always feel overwhelming. So controlled systemic stress for the asset looks really different. Slow breathing practices are a perfect example, especially when done in a way where CO2 rises. This isn't about calming down. In fact, the practices themselves are not calming. This is about staying present as that internal pressure increases. As the breath slows, the system really wants to squirt away and escape. Sensation intensifies. Old impulses to flee, shortcut, distract, or dissociate come online. Training happens precisely by staying. The asset learns something critical here. Pressure does not require collapse or fusion. Space can exist, even when intensity rises. Over time, sensitivity stops then being a liability and becomes discernment. Again, the same stressors, emotional rooms, charged conversations, crowded environments, they retain less impact. Not because the asset has become numb, but because their system has learned how to remain intact even while they are in contact. This is the pattern across the board. If you do not increase systemic resilience, stressors do not lose their power. If you do not loosen attachment to your fear through lived experience, insight alone cannot override biology. Gentle healing has its place, but resilience is trained, not granted. This is why our Somatic Skins book goes into such detail about how different systems need to meet stress in order to change. You can order it in the link below. It's not about pushing harder. It's about applying the right kind of stress at the right dosage in the right order. And that's why inside the Prestige, we work with controlled systemic stress live in simulators, our events, not as overwhelm, not as shock, but as deliberate exposure that teaches the nervous system something new about what it can survive, what it can integrate, and how to move through. Because the goal is not to eliminate stress. It's to outgrow its authority. If you want to know where your system still collapses, clings, avoids, start with a quiz. It'll show you which stressors still have leverage and which kind of training actually changes that. I'll see you next time. If you have enjoyed this video, thank you so much for being here. Do like and subscribe. It helps us out, and we enjoy creating this with you.